You know, it's never a dull day in the news cycle anytime you get to talk about GLAAD. Like, you guys know that I've done plenty of videos on companies like GLAAD, organizations, whatever you want to call them. GLAAD is a company that basically is the school monitor, right? Like, they're the monitors of Hollywood to make sure that these studios are making everything as gay as humanly possible. And apparently GLAAD just recently came out with their brand new Responsibility Index report, whatever the hell that is. And apparently Netflix and Disney produced the most films with LGBTQ content in the year of 2022. And I found this to be very interesting, considering that these companies, especially Disney, try to say that they're not part of the culture wars, that they're not trying to purposefully indoctrinate anybody into LGBTQ ideology. They are just simply doing what they do best. But apparently, considering that they are immensely gayer than every other studio, I think it's an interesting topic. So let's get into the article, guys, from Bounding Into Comics. But of course, before we do, if you're new here, consider subscribing, man. I'm Shadowban as hell, and like the video to push us out into the YouTube algorithm. It says it's that time of year again, the time where LGBTQ watchdog organization, and that's honestly the best way to explain what they are, GLAAD rates major Hollywood studios on just how gay content they are squeezing into their films and television content. Now, to be very clear, this is the CEO, okay, of GLAAD. If you guys have never heard of this company, if you're new here, whatever the case may be, this is the CEO of GLAAD. Of course, it is a white, blonde-haired, liberal woman. Should anybody be shocked by this? I don't really know. Time is going to tell. But honestly, when I first saw the picture of the CEO, I honestly laughed because this is the person that talks about uplifting minorities, diversity, all this other nonsense. And it's a typical white woman who's a liberal, who is at the top pushing all this nonsense. So yes, this is the CEO, Sarah Kate Ellis of GLAAD. It says, responsible for the increasing push of gay, transgender, and non-binary content produced for big and small screens across the world, GLAAD CEO Sarah Kate Ellis is the face and voice behind Hollywood's largest LGBTQ lobby. For the last 10 years, well, I didn't even realize they were around that long, GLAAD has conducted an annual Studio Responsibility Index, which tracks just how woke Hollywood is. And while every major studio is pushing LGBTQ content, some major studios, in the eyes of GLAAD, is doing a better job than others. Now, keep in mind, on the last index, if I'm not mistaken, pretty much every single studio failed according to their guidelines or whatever the hell they made up regarding this index. So I'm curious to see who has passed now. Apparently, I guess Netflix and Disney, but let's get into it. Of the 350 films released theatrically and on track streaming services by the 10 distributors counted in 2022, 128.5% were LGBTQ inclusive, GLAAD reveals in their report, noting that this is the highest percentage and number recorded in this report. Guys, almost 30% of, wow, almost 30% of 100 distributors were LGBTQ friendly. Almost 30%. That's insane. This report shows an 8% increase in LGBTQ representation from last year's report, GLAAD further specified. Of the 100 LGBTQ inclusive films released in 2022, 55% including gay men, 45% included lesbians, 21% included bisexual characters, 12% included transgender characters, and 17% included queer characters that don't fall specifically into any of those labels, the report also revealed. Wow, that is just immensely insane. This is what we mean by checkboxes. Like, you guys realize this, right? You have all these people who come out and try to say, oh, there's no checkbox hiring. There's no checkboxing when it comes to making a TV show or whatever, or movie. There's no checkboxing at all. We just hired the best person for the role, we promise. And then meanwhile, you literally have these checkboxes that have to be checked in order for yourselves to be deemed inclusive enough. This is what we're talking about, okay? You don't have checkboxes for white characters, but you're gonna say, oh, well, white people were predominantly showcased in movies and TV shows in the past. We're just correcting the issue. That is such a bullshit statement, and you guys, like, a lot of you guys know that, okay? Some of the best TV shows and movies in histories have black leads, for example. Now, if you want to talk about LGBTQ representation, it wasn't necessarily forced like it is now. Everything happened pretty much as organically as possible back then. But now you have checkboxing through the roof, and it's really showing in your actual products. Now, it says the report report shows that the genre of comedy and drama had over 40% of their film be LGBTQ inclusive, which is 2 times as many as the number 3 genre of horror. When the report goes deeper into what studios are responsible for putting more gay and transgender characters on screen, Disney and Netflix are the 2 studios leading the rainbow charge. Anybody shocked by that? Anybody shocked at all? Disney and Netflix are literally one of the wokest studios by far. I'm not surprised that these studios are the leading cause. I'm more shocked that Amazon Studios isn't up there higher. You know what I mean? Like, Amazon Studios has a fair rating. Out of 35 films, they got 34%, so that's considered fair to GLAAD. And then you got Apple TV at 18%, Lionsgate at 17%, NBC at 24%, Netflix 22%, but you got to keep in mind, 22% out of 107 films. That's a lot of films coming out of Netflix. Paramount Global, 24 films at 29%, and then the Walt Disney Company at a staggering 41% with 59 films, and Warner Bros. Discovery at 42% at 19 films. Now, I don't know why Walt Disney gets good while Warner Brothers gets insufficient when they are 1% higher. I'm not really sure how that works, but again, I'm sure that this rating system is complete garbage to begin with anyway. It says the Walt Disney Company scored 41%, the second highest rating in the report, for featuring 24 LGBTQ inclusive films out of 59. With a total of 107 films in 2022, Netflix received a fair rating with a 22%, which amounts to 24 LGBTQ inclusive films, matching Disney in the number of films LGBTQ inclusive. Disney and Netflix feature the most LGBTQ inclusive films out of any other studios. Regarding GLAAD's own definition of favorable ratings, Disney, NBC Universal, and A24 received the best rating of good in the report for having at least 1 of 3 of all film content supporting LGBTQ representation. Warner Bros. Discovery received the best percentage out of any other studio with 42%, or 8 of their 19 films, to be LGBTQ inclusive. That is insane, man. That's almost half of their films being LGBTQ inclusive. It's just crazy, man. But we always knew Warner Brothers was super woke, okay? Like, even though David Zaslav took over and everything like that, like, we know that this is not going to stop. He's only one man. He's got to deal with a lot of different people, and the wokeness is going to continue. It's only a matter of time. He can promise the world as much as he possibly wants, but that shit is not going to stop. The only studio to receive a poor rating was Lionsgate, featuring only 1 LGBTQ inclusive film out of the 6 cinematic projects they produced in 2022. Then GLAAD specifically brings attention to Clerks 3 for teasing LGBTQ representation, but not committing to it, noting that the film has a scene where the protagonist's deceased wife mentioned the men and women she slept with in heaven. It reads as more of a throwaway joke than real representation. They complained, adding GLAAD urges Lionsgate to make efforts for solid and meaningful LGBTQ representation in future projects. Along with scoring film studios, GLAAD is also using the Vito Russo test to rate individual movies on just how gay they are, essentially, which stipulates that a film can only be approved if it meets all 4 of the following criteria. Okay, here's the breakdown. Number 1, the film contains a character that is identifiably lesbian, gay, blah, blah, blah. Number 2, that character must not be solely or predominantly defined by their sexual orientation or gender identity. And I think this part right here, truthfully, this part right here is where a lot of studios mess up, because when they are forced to make these fake diverse characters, they make them in the utmost ridiculous stereotypes you could possibly imagine. So the entire character is based in their sexuality. Like, that is their personality, and that's where a lot of these studios mess up, in my opinion. The LGBTQ character must be tied to the plot in such a way that the character's removal would have a significant effect, meaning the character is not there to simply provide colorful commentary, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you want to be the main character. The LGBTQ character story must not be outwardly offensive, avoids defaulting to well-known tropes or stereotypes with no further development, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so these are all very typical things that you would expect regarding an organization that's focused solely on trying to make everything as gay as humanly possible. But I do think it's damn funny that a lot of these studios still did not perform, even to this day, did not perform high on their rating scale. Considering just how woke things have gotten, I wonder just how much more woke things have to get before GLAAD is going to give out good ratings to a lot of these studios, because it seems like only the major studios are scoring high, and those are the ones that are completely taken over by this nonsense, like Disney, for example. It says, according to GLAAD, 100 out of all 350 Hollywood movies released in 2022 were LGBTQ inclusive films. Of those 100 films, only 77 passed the organization's Vito Russo test, or 77% of all LGBTQ inclusive movies. 2022 saw the number percentage of Hollywood films films with gay inclusion increased by 10% from 12% in 2021 to 22% in 2022. That is massive. That is massive, and honestly, it's not going to stop. It's going to keep going. They're not going to stop with this stuff, and it's very clear that this stuff right here is tied into the funding of a studio. They make more money based on how woke they are. If they can get high ratings on this stuff, guaranteed it opens the door to more funding, more loans, more whatever they need to get money and keep things going. So this is not going to stop. This is not going to go anywhere. None of this stuff should be shocking to anybody, but I still think it's pretty damn hilarious considering that Disney wants to get out of the culture wars, and yet they are one of the top studios that are producing stuff that is completely against the culture wars. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you did enjoy it, and if you did, consider leaving me a subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video, comment, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Hypnotic out.